Welcome to Leadership and Motivation Unleashed, practical leadership for modern workplaces. A podcast where we explore actionable strategies to help you lead with confidence, build cohesive teams, and create thriving workplace cultures.
We're here for the career-focused professionals climbing the corporate ladder, the managers navigating team dynamics, and the leaders shaping the future of work. In each episode, we'll break down challenges, share practical advice, and leave you with insights you can apply today.
I'm Patrick Law, your co-host, a Gulf War veteran with over 26 years of corporate leadership experience in banking and payments, blending precision and innovation with a tad of passion to solve big challenges.
And I'm Rachel Book, a C-suite trusted advisor and an HR leader with 2 decades of experience at Fortune 50 companies, specializing in building people-first strategies and driving impactful talent solutions.
Together, Rachel and I, we combine operational expertise and transformational leadership to bring you real-world advice on leadership, workplace culture, team dynamics, career growth, and anything else that we may want to delve into.
So, if you're ready to take your career and leadership skills to the next level, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Leadership and Motivation Unleashed. Today, we're doing something a little different. Over the last few months, we've had some amazing conversations around what it takes to lead with clarity and purpose in today's fast-changing workplace. So for this episode, we pulled together 5 of the most powerful insights from our recent episodes, real-world leadership lessons that can help you build a resilient, purpose-driven career in 2025. So whether you're navigating ambiguity, adapting to AI, or trying to lead more authentically, these are the ideas that keep coming up again and again. Let's dive in. First up, let's talk about ambiguity. As leaders, we're constantly dealing with uncertainty, but the ability to recognize and operate in the gray can actually become one of your greatest strengths.
We are excited for our topic today. This was one of the topics that we teed up in our intro about the top trends that we encounter in the workplace this year, and it's all about ambiguity. We talked about how to deal with an environment where there's a lot of gray and making sure that we actually recognize when the gray is there, right? Before we figure out how to deal with that, since that is so key. So Patrick, there's so much to talk about on this topic. Some things that go through my mind is that for some of us, ambiguity is kind of fun, right? It's adventurous, it's exciting. And then for others, it's really confusing and overwhelming and anxiety inducing. So I think different people react differently when they encounter ambiguity. Some people just naturally like it more or less. And sometimes the ambiguity is a short-term condition, right? It might be a period of time where things are ambiguous or blurry for specific reasons. And sometimes ambiguity is just the way it's going to be forever. So what are some of your thoughts on ambiguity in the workplace and how people should process it and deal with it?
Those of us who are old enough in the workforce, 9/11 was a version of that. Like air travel stopped. Like that's a version of a mind shake that you need to be good at balancing the non-standard. And ambiguity for me is a version of gray. And at US Bank, we got really good at risk and compliance overnight because all these federal agencies started in 08 and 09 to babysit banks, credit unions, financial services, payments companies, because too big to fail came out of all that. And ambiguity became the rallying cry of the entire organization. And look, a lot of people didn't make it. Like we took pay cuts. So I want to say it was VPs and above took a 25% haircut on our pay. And it lasted a while. And they didn't give it back to us. Even when they restored our full pay, it's not like they paid us back to 25%. It was just part of it. Richard went to $1 a year of salary.
Wow.
And I think
that's leadership.
And I think he kept it for like 2 years. Now, look, the man had a ton of stock. He wasn't hungry. He's a CEO of a Fortune 150 organization. And at the time, because so many banks failed, like overnight, US Bank went from number 9 or 10 to number 5 in the country because so many banks disappeared in a week. It's scary, right? And that ambiguity cry rallied the whole company to, okay, we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's ambiguity. Get comfortable being uncomfortable. There's no rule book. There's no sometimes rhyme or reason.
Next, we're looking at artificial intelligence, not as a threat, but as a tool. How can leaders stay curious, adapt, and use AI to enhance their teams rather than replace them? Big question.
Obviously, artificial intelligence is way high on everyone's mind. As Rachel also said in the intro, you may hear some things that you agree with, disagree with, or somewhere in between. So I'm just going to jump right in it and give you Patrick's version of what I see. First and foremost, I'm not an expert in this at all. I'm just wickedly curious about it and have been for a long time. And there's actually, Chuck Alt put out an article this morning, a Q&A that I did with our head of marketing about my experiences with automation, machine learning, artificial intelligence. And I think that's really part of what I want to get across today in today's episode is curiosity around it. You don't need to be a data scientist. You don't need to be a developer. This stuff isn't new. This is artificial intelligence, machine learning, automation's been around forever in various forms. And when I was at Elan Financial Services at US Bank Corp, we had a capacity problem anywhere where I had enough people on the teams I've led. And I've been in leadership in some form or fashion since 1998. I was 2 years into my career and they started giving me people to lead. And that'll be another topic about leadership. And are you a natural born leader? Do you learn it? And it's both. But one of my favorite things to do is to lead people. And it always bothered me so much that I never had enough help to give them. And that there was always headwinds and turbulence. And a lot of people default to, you can enhance a human's performance. You don't have to replace the human. So 2011 to 2013-ish at US Bank with Elan, we were really short on people in an area that had a lot of repetitive tasks. And this company that I don't even think is around anymore, so I'm not going to mention them, developed software that was really affordable. And the way approvals in Fortune 200 companies are, it would have taken us a long time to get approval to go do that. I'll just fund it. Go figure it out, Patrick, which is autonomy is one of my favorite things. And going against the grain professionally is also one of my favorite things. So we went and found this company. I sent 2 operations people to Chicago for 4 days. And they taught them over 4 days to write strings, not replacing, but enhancing the work of 80 people on the team. I didn't necessarily always have. Life happens. People take leaves or, they sadly fall ill or they move on to other jobs, and retraining of people takes a long time and it's very expensive, where a machine doesn't really stop. So that was my first dip of the toe into that. And it was super exciting. And I've been enthralled with it ever since. I think what we wanted to talk about today is from 2011 to 2013 to 2023 to 2025, the advancements in technology is so massive and it proliferates almost everything we do now. I mean, I have team members where every email gets pushed into a chat GPT or whatever engine you're using to change structure or format. That's one version of artificial intelligence. And then there's teams, what we've actually embedded here, where you can ask it a question and it answers you in real time. It doesn't mean speak to you. The machine is just responding back in text. But, we're coming to a time where there'll be a shape to the machine. And that's the Star Trek, Star Wars side of this thing that I think have people really freaked out, is like the replacement of humans. Now, maybe hundreds of years from now, that'll become a reality, because I am a believer that TV and movies and books forecast the future. I mean, look at 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea. 100 years before submarines existed, they were writing books about submarines. So maybe one day, but in our lifetimes, the people who are listening today, or maybe even in the future, and me and you and what we're doing at our current employer, Rachel, that's not going to happen. So what I'm attacking this with is, how do I take my limited bucket of resource and talent that I have and enhance it with machines, robotics, automation, AI, machine learning, call it what you want, because a lot of people call the same thing different names. I'm talking about all of it in a bucket. How do I help our customers move faster? Because we want them growing their revenue because it grows our revenue. And every business is really built like that, whether you're a B2C group or a B2B group. If you swing in not-for-profits or military organizations or law enforcement, this is relevant as well because there's things that police officers do that are repetitive. Think about all the reports they have to write and the legal briefs. I mean, DA offices won't pick up cases unless this stuff, every I is dotted and T is crossed and yada, yada. I mean, you can use some of this technology to get the officers out enforcing the peace and engaging with their communities instead of sitting at a desk. Like that's a version of non-corporate uses of this stuff. And I think the thing that ties it all together, regardless of how you're going to execute the technology, is keeping that part in mind, is that it is a scary stuff, but you're enhancing the person or freeing the person to do what their real job is. So I think we're going to ebb and flow through that dialogue. And Rachel, I know you have a lot of commentary on this from the human performance perspective, but I wanted to get all that out.
Yeah, really interesting insights. And I think what you just outlined, Patrick, is that even though this feels very new and futuristic, it's actually really not. It's another stage in the Industrial Revolution, right? So, I mean, in the past, I'm sure whoever invented the abacus got a lot of heat because the people that were hired to like stroke count or do it however they counted things, right? We're like, oh my gosh, there's this new invention called the abacus, and now we're not going to have jobs. And then it happened again with the calculator. So this is a natural evolution. And I think we can't even imagine what might be next, right? 10, 20, 50, 100 years down the line. Personally, I think it's exciting because there's more than enough work to go around. And if we can divest some of the busy work, then it gives us more time to focus on the things that are more important.
Remote work is here to stay, but it's not one size fits all. In this segment, we explore how remote and hybrid work environments impact learning, development, and connection, especially for early career professionals.
I've also managed remote teams over the years. And what I've realized is it's not for everyone and it's not for every job, right? Remote work has its place. And we're going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing now in the workforce, what we're hearing in the news about these return to the office mandates. Are they going well? Are they not going well? What are some of the pluses, minuses? So we're going to talk through that. And then we're going to leave you off with a quick takeaway from each of us. So Patrick, what are your thoughts on remote work?
I've always been, as I work from home now for transparency, I've always been a proponent and a fan of work at the office. And there's actually some things on the internet, if you Google my name and office, things come up on websites about my approach to remote work and return to office things. Now, being, I'll call it a soldier, even though it was a long time ago, I do believe in following orders. And if the commander's intent is remote work, I'm going to support it and execute to the best of my abilities. If the commander's intent is to get your ass in the office, then I'm going to support getting everyone in the office. Some people would say, well, then you don't think on your own. I've actually had people say, Pat, you're just so robotic. I'm not robotic. I'm respectful to the people who pay my mortgage. So if the commander wants something, I'm going to climb the hill to execute on it. That doesn't mean I don't share my voice, and it doesn't mean I necessarily believe in the mission, but it's a choice to work where you work, and you need to execute with your voice heard. You can be respectful, those things. So I wanted to put that out before you hear the following. At US Bancorp, it was and I was there 14 years from 2005 to 2018. I think the math is right on that. I was at the office every day, 5 days a week. And if you pick apart the pluses and minuses of being in an office 5 days a week, I think there's like learning through osmosis in an office environment. I think the cube environment, the office environment, you cannot replicate getting up from your chair, walking around the wall, and me going to see Rachel eyeball to work something out. Where in this environment, I call her, or we text, or we Teams. Both work and both are effective. Now, she and I are both very senior, so whatever learnings would happen about doing our job was probably minimal. And she and I are both very engaging, so we built a relationship when the moments we do see each other, whether here in Dallas or Miami or New York, where the two of us see each other on occasion. But for employees who don't have the tenure she and I have been blessed enough to acquire, and you're new to an environment or new to a role, learning something like that through a screen, I believe to be very next to impossible. next to impossible. Not impossible, but unless your brain is built for remote learning, you can't do it. I have a buddy who listens to this podcast. He's a retired Marine colonel, and he's done several continuing educations after he left the Marine Corps. And he tells me, we were together a couple of weeks ago at a concert. He's like, I can't do remote learning. I have to be in a classroom. He drives to a site. It's a brain thing. Like whether you're 24 or 44 or 64, we all learn differently. And I think being together is a better learning experience than being apart. Now that's the leadership side of it. And I'm going to address this side of it because there's some darkness to this.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you were talking, what's going through my mind is a lot of the issues at hand that are attributed to remote work, right? Pro or con, pluses or minuses, I think is about other topics, and we're just using remote work as like a smokescreen. So for example,
please uncover it.
Yeah. So for example, we all know that when you give something to someone, it's really hard to take it away. Right. So, for example, during COVID, right, you shone a light on situations where employees had additional expenses or burdens while working from home. Right. Not everyone has a designated room in their house where they had an office space. Also, back then, there were all kinds of other complications. Right. Schools and daycares weren't open. Right. People's lives are upside down. There were more people using the bandwidth in your home Wi-Fi than ever before. Right. So, slightly different situation. But on the other hand, people stopped spending money on commuting, on dry cleaning, right, on expensive salads, right, in the middle of New York City. And they realized, wow, I can save a lot of money by not getting dressed and traveling into an office every day. And I'm able to spend more time with my family and my pets and my hobbies. And so I think all of a sudden when you say, okay, now we have to revert to where we were before, and now you have to start spending money on dry cleaning and spending an hour each way commuting into the office, people are like, well, then you need to pay me more money because it's going to cost me a lot more. This eats into my salary. One of our recurring themes has been about ownership. The old employer-employee contract is changing, and it's more important than ever to take control of your own growth.
Thinking over the past decades, right, and especially even more so in the past probably year to 3 years, it seems to me like the relationship or the contract, that's in air quotes, between an employer and employee is changing. What you see from the employer side is less commitment, right? You see companies laying people off even when they've just raised a round of funding, even when they're reporting great numbers to Wall Street, and they're still culling their ranks, they're still reducing their workforce. Sometimes it's to focus on other areas of business. And very often they're employees that have been there for decades, people who are top performers, and yet they're just sometimes told in a very sterile email or Zoom meeting, like, sorry, you don't work here anymore, right? Despite all of your contributions. And I think a lot of people are like, I gave my everything to this company. I was planning to stay here until I retired, right? So you see a lot of that more so recently, which is very rattling to some people. And then what you also see is employers looking at habits of job seekers and saying, oh, there's so much job hopping, or, oh, look, they were only at this job for a year or two, and they are expecting more stability. Or they would like to hire people who want to give them a commitment of 3 to 5 years. And I think that this is a shift that is here to stay. I think that the contract or the relationship between employers and employees is changing. I think gone are the days where somebody graduates from college or leaves the military and joins a big company and says, I'm going to be here until I retire. And if I just keep my head down and do my work, everything's going to be fine. And they'll just let me stay here as long as I don't, lie, cheat, or steal. And that is not the case anymore. Unfortunately, even though the rules have changed, I don't think we've prepared job seekers or employers enough to be able to operate within these new rules. So what do you think of that?
You're right. That's a lot. I have hot sports opinions about everything. I'll just jump in and say, and this is why, if you guys read our bios, why Rachel and I work so well together, because she is very buttoned up and highly polished.
Sometimes.
So I joined corporate America in 96 with at the time, I think it was privately held. It ended up going public, founded and led by one of the world's greatest entrepreneurial spirits around, Darwin Deason. I'll say his name out loud.
hard charging, hustle, go hard, go fast. It was known in the organization that there was no guarantees you'd see tomorrow. It was what have you done in the last minute for the organization? I'll say younger listeners, but maybe all listeners, depending on where you were and what your belief system is, would hear that and say, "Oh, that's horrible. What a horrible place to work." But for me, what it did for the rest of my career, and look, even if you dribble in a little bit of the military, like nothing's guaranteed. In the military, it's your life. Like depending on the role you play, you may not see tomorrow, depending on your mission, the job. And I'm not trying to be, all drama about it. It's real life. The military isn't there to keep you safe and to coddle you. You must execute and you must find ways to grow, survive. Corporate America, I think, should always have a little bit of that in it. I didn't come up in a world where I expected ACS or GenPass or US Bank or Pfizer would take care of me. I have to take care of me. I have to grow me. I am responsible for me. So my contract or agreement with my employer, I know could end tomorrow, the next minute. What am I doing to add value so my name doesn't end up on that list? For better or worse, the list being, we don't need this person anymore. Or like Rachel said, they're going to shut down this part of the business and focus on this one. Have I positioned myself from a skill set perspective to be valuable no matter what the business's decisions are? That's what everybody should be doing. I'll drift a little bit here and say, I've been the person at the table that chose who to lay off and who not to lay off. And it is awful. If you're the person that has to deliver the message, which I have done dozens of times, and you never get good at it, and you should be grateful you don't get good at it. Like, that is not something you want to say, I'm really good at this. You're bad. I have lumps in my throat or fumble with words, which upsets me because the person receiving that very horrible, bad news deserves better. But my nerves would sometimes get the best of me. You can put that stuff in a cold, dark place, but for the most part, we're all human and you don't ever want to be on the receiving end of that. But I always went into it knowing there's no guarantees. I think everything is free agency. Just like a corporation shouldn't take you for granted. Like, it's a gift that the corporation has your skill set and expertise, but it isn't a God-given right that they appreciate you forever or need you forever, and vice versa. So that's where leadership cuts through the middle of that. True, authentic leadership.
And finally, we're wrapping up with a conversation about culture. Toxic environments can destroy morale, and it's up to leaders to create spaces where people feel safe, supported, and able to thrive.
I'm excited about this one. You probably think that's weird that I'm excited to talk about toxic environments, but they're real. And
They are.
They're everywhere. They're in the military. They're in law enforcement. They're in fire departments. They're in not-for-profits. They're in corporate America, private equity, venture capital, publicly traded, name it. Maybe in your household, sadly. Like, we all know, and maybe sometimes are the reason for the toxic environments. So this would be a good dialogue. So Rachel, I'll kick it to you to fire us off.
Wow. So, I think we have to tackle this topic from two perspectives. So one, from the perspective of a leader. So if you are a leader in an environment which is toxic, whether you're noticing it yourself or it has been pointed out to you, you have a real responsibility to deal with it. So I think that's one perspective. The second perspective is if you are the subject or the recipient, I don't want to say victim, but if you are the recipient of toxicity in your work environment, what do you do? Right? How do you speak up? How do you decide if it's safe to speak up? How do you decide if you just suck it up and deal with it? So I think there's really those two perspectives that we should tackle. On the first one, if you're the leader, I believe very strongly that toxicity is never productive and leaders should never allow it. Patrick and I have a real no asshole policy where we work. Somebody could be amazing at their job, but if they're not nice to people and they are creating a toxic environment and they're being disrespectful, they should not have the privilege to work with us. We can always find someone else who can do that job equally or better. right? So I think leaders, and this is a philosophy, I believe this with the core of my being, that leaders have a responsibility to fix this, right? To look out for it. If it's pointed out to them, they should acknowledge it and deal with it. Hopefully they have a good HR partner to figure out how to go about doing an investigation, how to make sure that you're not making any false accusations, right? That you're removing bias from the situation. But toxic environments are crippling, they are crushing, and they prevent people from being productive because they're thinking about the drama all day.
I said the same thing in the room. I'd be like, why do we want assholes working here? I mean,
Right.
We have a lot of good humans here, and the place is hard enough. These places are hard. I mean, it doesn't matter where you work. The places where I work, the places where you work, wherever anyone work, could be the Marine Corps, could be the Colleyville Police Department. I don't know, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
people make things harder than they need to be. We all have jobs because people exist. Mistakes happen because of people. And until Skynet rises and the machines are running the earth before they turn on us, imperfection is the word. Imperfection. We're going to make mistakes. Our outside lives impact our inside lives, right? Like lots of people deal with a lot of tough things, and then they come to work, they're going to make mistakes. Don't confuse people having a tough time with toxicity. Now, let me turn the wheel and say, there are people that wake up in the morning and make everyone else's day hell. I don't know why. I've never figured that out. But there are. It's almost like there's some people out there that find joy in sprinkling bullshit through an environment and watching people turn. I had a boss, God rest his soul, I won't say his name, but for some of you who are listening to this, the company was GenPass Technologies, and he was the founder and CEO. He would say out loud, I like it when my direct reports argue with each other. It breeds a different level of engagement and ideation. Maybe that's true. I don't know.
We hope these highlights inspired you as much as they inspired us. If you heard something that resonated with you, please feel free to go back and check out the full episodes. There's so much more where this came from. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to Leadership and Motivation Unleashed. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating and review. It only takes 1 minute, and it helps the show grow and reach more leaders like you in search of advice and motivation.
And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Please remember to share with your friends and family and coworkers, mentors, trusted advisors. This show is for everybody. See you next time.